It isn't that the Bible is true. It's that the Bible is the precondition for the manifestation of truth, which makes it way more true than just true. It's a whole different kind of true. And I think this is not only literally the case, factually, I think it can't be any other way.
At this point in Jordan Peterson's life, you can see that he is beginning to affirm that the Bible is true. However, when he's pressed on his belief in God in later interviews, all he will concede is that he tries to act as if God exists. But at the very least, this affirmation he makes seems true, because in the clip you're about to see, he challenges famous new atheist thinker Sam Harris on the existence of God and exposes a glaring flaw in his reasoning. I'm going to share my thoughts at the end. Let's get into it.
Do you believe that there is a implicit unity underneath a list of positive moral attributes, so that if you took beauty, truth, love, gratitude, you had mentioned love and gratitude, for example, and beauty. If I said, well, is there something in common that unites beauty, truth, love, and gratitude? And it wouldn't be the sum, right? It's more like the gist. It's more like the essence. It's the commonality of goods that, and it seems to me, Sam, that merely the fact that you can use a category like good or bad or good and evil, within the category of good are things united by their participation in the good. And so is there anything about that claim that you find off-putting?
Well, there's some analogies we could use to capture it. I mean, I do think of these things as almost facets of a single jewel, right? And so the facets are different. It's you can talk about beauty and not talk about love in the same conversation. That you can have a coherent discussion of beauty without reference to love, and vice versa. But when you're talking about the conscious states that maximize one's appreciation of all of these things and participation in all of these things, it's easy to intuit that there's a common structure to the whole picture. And so so a jewel with its facets is one analogy I would use. But I would also, but I want to subvert that for a second, because my view of the moral landscape is that it's very likely a landscape with multiple peaks, right, and multiple valleys. And so this can sound like moral relativism in the sense that, you and I might be, climbing the same peak over here as Homo sapiens in a Western 21st century context, but at some great distance from ourselves, there are possible minds, and perhaps even real minds, that could exist in another galaxy, or that we could create artificially, etc., that are organized on very different principles, and yet have conscious states that admit of, again, right and wrong answers with respect to the variables of suffering and well-being. And you could conceive of those as capaciously as you want, but there could be possibilities of happiness and creativity and amazement that we can't imagine because we don't have the requisite minds, right? There's just nothing about our current minds, or even the likely path we're going to take when we augment our minds technologically or genetically in the future. We're just going to miss these spots on the landscape, and yet these landscapes, these spots have the same peak and valley structure. And there could be peaks that if we were more omniscient than we are or ever going to be, we would be able to compare these two peaks and say that it's better to be, one is higher than the other with respect to certain variables. Which is to say, I just don't think it's all random. I think there is structure there in among possible experiences, given whatever the natural laws are that determine the nature of experience in this or any universe. The place where I break from religion, I mean, certainly a religion like Christianity or Judaism or Islam, is just it's on many points, but the crucial point is just on the claims about the unique sanctity and divine origin of specific books, right? I mean, the moment you're going to talk about all books as the products of human creativity and ingenuity, then we're just talking about the utility of specific books and specific ideas in whatever context attracts our interest. And so we can talk about the Bible, we can talk about the Quran, we can talk about the wisdom to be found in those books, and we also can talk about the barbaric injunctions that we want to ignore in those books. And we must evaluate the wisdom or the barbarousness by using our own 21st century intuitions about what constitutes wisdom now, given all the challenges we face, and what constitutes obvious barbarism that we want to leave behind us. And so the thing that makes me an atheist from a Christian point of view or a Muslim point of view is that I am unpersuaded by the textual claims that anchor those two faiths, and that any real adherent to those two faiths has to make, in my view, and in the views of most adherents. But I would totally grant you that there are great stories in 1,000 different books that we might want to use to inspire us to be wiser than we tend to be, right? The King Arthur literature, it seems totally worthy of our attention, and there are many other good sources on that particular shelf, but no one is taking the King Arthur. No one is practicing suicide bombing or fully deranging their politics over their close reading of the King Arthur material, right? It's just the literature is not doing that kind of mad work for us, and I think that's a good thing. And so I want to live in a world where we recognize that all we have communally is the possibility of having a conversation that can be more or less persuasive, more or less enlightening, and it's a conversation not just across in the present, with the living minds that are available, but it's a conversation with reference to the greatest minds that preceded us, of which we have some record. There are many great minds, presumably, that are totally lost to us because, they burned the library at Alexandria. But we have this residue of past wisdom and past insight, which is, the world's literature, and we should avail ourselves of it to our heart's content, all the while recognizing that these are just human beings having a cross-generational conversation about important things. And none of these books is beyond criticism and beyond ignoring, right? And that's the crucial bit.
You're so it seems to me that your objection to the religious is fundamentally, given your belief in a transcendent good, given your belief in the reality of evil, given your notion that we do have an intrinsic directionality, given your idea that we need to believe in the genuine existence of a moral landscape, is that your objection is it's something like an objection to dogmatism per se.
Yeah.
Right? And then we might ask ourselves, well, and that dogmatism is the willingness of people to use the tradition to what? To derive their own benefit, to justify themselves without making the moral effort? Like, how would you go about defining that inappropriate dogmatism? Right? It's also an attempt to make the ineffable fully comprehended, right? Because the thing about a religious totalitarian or a totalitarian of any sort is that the totalitarian will tell you that they have the truth in its final form, right? That's really the totalitarian claim. So what is it about, what do you think characterizes that fundamental dogmatism?
Well, first I would point out that it's only in religion that the concept of dogma is not a pejorative. In fact, I mean, in the Catholic context, it's explicitly a good thing. I mean, there's no embarrassment over the reliance on dogma. It's a Catholic term. But everywhere else in our lives, we recognize that it is intrinsically divisive and incapable of tracking the truth. Right? But I mean, something that's held dogmatically is something that is held, a belief that is held in spite of the fact that there's no good evidence for it, or in fact, in
Right.
in
But held why?
opposition.
But held why?
No, but I just want to nail this particular point down, because this is the crucial thing to recognize, in my view. We understand in every other area of our lives that this is not that this is intellectually not only not pragmatic and not helpful and not playing by the rules. It's actually indecent, right? It's the antithesis of what we admire intellectually, right? Immunity to counter evidence, no matter how compelling, is not a good thing intellectually and ethically in any secular context, right? So if I say to you, listen, I believe X, and there's nothing you can say to convince me otherwise, and the more you, no matter how good your evidence gets, no matter how good your arguments get, I'm not going to want to hear it. And if you press the case, I'm going to get angrier and angrier until the possibility of having a conversation about anything fully erodes, right? That is the status quo with respect to religious sectarianism across the world. It has been that way for thousands of years, and it is still that way. Every Muslim, Christian, Jew, Mormon, Hindu, every true religious person of any denomination, to the degree that they really are truly religious, and it's a faith-based enterprise, has said in advance of any conversation on any topic, listen, there are a few core things I believe and that my children believe, and I have taught them to believe. And I don't want you meddling in any of that stuff, right? And I'm going to get pissed off to the point of violence, or at least I will be tolerant of the violence of my co-religionists if you push too hard on this particular door. The conversation is over where these core principles of faith start.
In this interview, it seems like Jordan Peterson is trying to get Sam Harris to recognize that he is relying on a higher moral authority, God, when he's appealing to values like love, justice, beauty, compassion. And Sam Harris, he acknowledges this, but he also believes that you don't need to appeal to a higher moral authority. It's not necessary for assessing these moral situations. And I think that his stance on this, it's pretty based, especially when compared to other beliefs like moral relativism, but it still has some issues that don't quite sit well with me. Some of them being, if there is no ultimate good, then that would lead to unclear decision-making and difficulty prioritizing conflicting values such as tolerance and love and justice, which is going to cause inconsistent ethical reasoning because the context is always changing when it comes to situations in society. Meanwhile, if there is an ultimate good, then that provides communal direction, everybody going towards an objective goal. And it's also going to prioritize long-term goals as opposed to short-term wants and needs in the context there. And it's also going to provide an ethical foundation for evaluating actions just in general. And an ethical system that has a transcendent ultimate good, it aligns more with our human experience. And to me, it seems like Sam's system here, it relies on the moral foundation for God, but it's kind of just tiptoeing around the idea that God's even there, not really, just trying not to acknowledge God's presence. And near the end of this clip, Peterson is really pressing Sam on recognizing the rationale behind people holding religious dogma and their views. But Sam, he quickly ignores this objections by ranting about how religious people can be intolerant and get angry about opposing views. And I get this. I mean, I definitely see people who are being intolerant of other people's religious views. And I think I'm even guilty of this myself at times, like just being intolerant and getting angry for no reason, because I feel like people are trying to attack me, but really they're just trying to learn the truth. And it's something I just need to understand. But anyways, I believe that if Jordan Peterson had more time to expand upon this objection he's making, he'd emphasize that religious people, they do not live by blind faith, but in fact, they live by an evidence-based faith where they use methodologies to assess the evidence and come to conclusions on the claims made in their religion. And I think he'd also caution Sam about taking any religious claims and labeling it as dogma and non-religious claims and labeling it as enlightened knowledge. Because I see even later in this interview, Sam, he holds to some assumptions that are very similar and could even be called dogma, such as only relying on scientific evidence as evidence, ignoring historical evidence, and not believing in the possibility of miracles. And he's not using universally justifiable methodologies when coming to these conclusions. So it can be really akin to dogma, like I said. But regardless, the thoughts I just conveyed in this video here, they're not airtight arguments for God's existence, but they are puzzle pieces to build this beautiful picture of what the creator of our universe looks like. If you want to learn more about those pieces that make up the picture of God, check out the video on screen right about there. Have a good day.